Welcome to the Guitar by Masters podcast. I'm your host, Carmen Stendler, and in this podcast, we'll be delving into numerous guitar topics, as well as having conversations with world's most renowned classical guitarists. In our first episode ever, we have a very special guest joining us from Chicago, US, Denis Azabagić. Born in Tuzla, Yugoslavia, Denis is a seasoned concert and recording artist, a prize winner of more than 20 international guitar competitions, among others a GFA winner, as well as a passionate educator and artistic director of music festivals in Europe and the US. Hi Denis, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello Carmen, nice to meet you. As I said earlier on this podcast, and just so much. It's such a pleasure to be part of this great Guitar by Masters platform.
So let's start at the very beginning. Who introduced you to classical guitar, and what made you decide later on that you want to dedicate your professional life to classical music?
My parents wanted their children to have a music education, so they enrolled me in a music school in my hometown, as you mentioned earlier, Tuzla, situated in northeastern part of Bosnia. So I started when I was very, very young, I believe even like 5 years old, when we started just sort of like a general music lessons and learning a little bit of, where the notes are, like, in the solfege, do is underneath the table and sol is on the window, something like that. And then when the time came, after I think a year, to choose an instrument, I had a very nice, I was lucky that that year, my teacher got hired in the school. His name is Predrag Stanković, and he sort of nudged me, I don't exactly know how, towards guitar, but I also remember that I wanted to play in a rock and roll band, because at that time I liked listening Beatles, so at the time I envisioned me in a rock and roll band. But as I said, this person, Predrag, my teacher, my first teacher and dear friend, he inspired not only in me, in many other students that he has had ever since, a love for classical music. So he was a pivotal in my decision to go towards classical music.
Beautiful. In the meantime, you have established yourself as a world-renowned concert artist, as well as a university professor based in Chicago. How did your path lead you there, and how different is the life of a classical guitarist in Europe compared to the US?
Oh, a lot to unpack there. How did the path lead me to Chicago? Well, you mentioned earlier that I come from former Yugoslavia, so the former Yugoslavia broke up during the civil war in the 90s. I was, in 1991, I studied in Zagreb under another great teacher, Darko Petrinjak. And after 1 year of my studies there, the war broke out, and since Bosnia was still part of the federal Yugoslavia and was part of that federal system, people of my age, young men of my age, 18 at the time I was, were drafted into military service. And I know that one of my friends and colleagues from the music academy in Zagreb, he did fight on the side of Croatian army later on. If I would have drafted in the Bosnian. So that shows you like really what could have happened, and what actually has happened in the Civil War, how close friends and even families get into such a incredible conflict and tragedy after all. So after when the war started in 1991 in the summer, my parents simply told me, look, just let's see if you can move away a little bit for a while until the things calm down. So I moved. I had some family in Netherlands, and I went to Netherlands, and the things didn't calm. As we know, they erupted big time, and war exploded. In Netherlands, I started studying at a music conservatory, met my wife and my partner, my musical partner, Eugenia. And I think you mentioned before my guitar competitions that I attended. And in 1993, I won a competition in Madrid, Guerrero competition. And at the time, it was one of the biggest competitions, and one of the prize was a concert in Bloomington, Indiana, because a professor, a teacher from Bloomington, Indiana, was in the jury, Ernesto Bitatti, so he invited me. So that's how after a while when we finished, when I say we, I said my wife and I at the time, we finished our studies in Rotterdam. We said, okay, let's try how's the life in the United States. So I experienced that a little bit. So I went to United States and we made our life here. But how does the life compare of a classical guitarist in the United States and in Europe? I can't quite say, because I developed my career in the United States. I did visit Europe often, obviously for, at the time for competitions, for concerts, for teachings, and now you're mentioning festivals and so on. So for us, somewhere deep, Europe is always home. So we are drawn to it. So every summer, we spend a couple of months in Europe, and we do feel at home there. We do feel at home in United States as well. Home is where you make it. But in terms of how is it for a classical guitarist, I don't really know how it is in Europe. I do know that when we were coming to United States, there were some people who were hesitant. I don't want to say word hesitant, but who were a little bit more skeptical of our idea or ambition to come to United States, because they said, there are no concerts here, there's not possible, whatnot. But I think, one makes its way no matter where you go or where you envision yourself, and you fight for it. So, I have some students that have graduated with me here in Chicago and returned to their home country of India, and it's a country with not such a developed classical guitar scene, but it's emerging and it's growing. So everybody finds their way in a different country. So I cannot really compare it since I don't have experience, but I think Europe is pretty good as well.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful how you said that you feel at home in both continents, so to say, and that you always like going back to Europe, but also established your life in the US, where for sure there's lots of opportunities as classical music goes. Of course, yes. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we all feel at home. We are drawn culturally to the things that we grew up with, right? So when I go to Bosnia, there are things that I feel at home. When I go to Spain, there are things that I feel at home as well, right? In the United States, obviously, but I just mentioned India earlier, and I miss going back there. I haven't been in a while, but it started to feel more at home, and primarily was because of the people you encounter and the friendships you make and the work you do there, and that environment of people and the things that you do create something that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, something that you can call home then at the end.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Actually, this is a great segue to the next question I wanted to ask you, since you were mentioning the Bosnian War in the 90s, which is, the 90s were, as we all know, a very turbulent time for your homeland of Yugoslavia, my homeland actually as well. It fell apart, and the Bosnian War was an especially long, tragic, and just overall devastating. How did this affect your life and also your aspirations as a young classical guitarist at that time?
Well, it certainly did affect my life. As I mentioned earlier, it stopped my studies in Netherlands, and stopped my studies in Croatia, and I moved to Netherlands. So there was a big shift there, and then there were many other things that came afterwards. In a sense, I took responsibility of taking care of myself, and later on, and of course together with my wife, helping my sister as well, because she left while my parents stayed in Bosnia. So, I did find myself from 1 year, studying in Zagreb and just thinking about practicing and playing and just being completely immersed in that world. Guitar, music, that's all I was thinking, right? To a year later or a couple of years later, being in a very, very different place, being in a place where I didn't know if I was able to stay in Netherlands, because I had a Yugoslav passport, and then suddenly that wasn't valid anymore. And then I got a Bosnian passport, but that wasn't recognized by all the countries in the world. So I remember an instance when I wanted to go to competition in La Herradura in Spain, in southern Spain, Andrés Segovia competition. My visa was expiring in mid-December, and the competition was end of December to January. So I wasn't able to come back to country, and going to the migration there to explain those things. And the only thing that mattered at the time when I was there, and I remember it very clearly, was like, how much money do you have on your account to prove that you can stay in this country legally, that you can support yourself until a certain amount. So my visa was extended based on the size of my bank account, right? If I have enough for 3 months, that is what was my visa was worth for. So that, as when you say how did it impact? It impacted in a way that it was a hard time. So you go through that, you do what you must do. But I think that also, when you're in a stressful situation, maybe you don't even find it is so stressful. Later on, maybe when you relax, body or psyche or the whole your whole being, as there is one book that says body remembers, then the body starts showing perhaps some symptoms that are far in the past perhaps. And I don't want to say that everything was bad at the time. Well, first of all, going to Netherlands is where I met my wife. She came from Spain to study to Netherlands, and we made our life together, and our duo, and our chamber music and projects and so on. So, and also I will always be grateful to Netherlands, because they gave me a status of a refugee, and they helped me both financially, and eventually I got a citizenship. So I did feel welcome by the country as a whole, as their attitude towards immigrants, right? But also by people that I've met there. And I do remember that, for example, the shift in me was that after we left Netherlands for a while, I wasn't keen of returning and visiting. And I think that was the subconscious effect of those times that I had there. But after a period of time, I don't know how long, I remember once when we went to Netherlands, I felt really so nice. And then when I saw people from there, it just warmed my heart, really, after a while. So, there is a certain element of stressful or traumatic experience of that time. How did it shape me in terms of guitarist or so on? I think it made me extremely goal-oriented, meaning that this is what has to be done, and I'm going to do that. There was no going back. There was no B plan, right? There was no backup. So the only thing that I could count on was me, and then my wife, and just moving forward, go to competitions, make the career, do this, do that. And yeah, so, well, life, in any case, a positive experience, right? Because challenges are also making you grow.
Yes, and lots of time I have this feeling that sometimes you go through certain things, and then only in retrospect you realize, you kind of ask yourself, how was I even able to do all of this? But at the moment when you have to, as you said, there's no plan B, it's just what needs to happen. But yeah, it was definitely a very, very difficult time, and especially a difficult time for an aspiring musician in their 20s that just work on their career, and it's like such a crucial time in the life of any musician. But yeah, you managed to do it wonderfully. So,
well, I'm not the only one, and I'm not the first one, and so many people have been in a very, very similar situation because as we can see today as well in these times, wars are part of our dark side of humanity. So we experience those very often, right? So thinking about the situation in that part of the world, in the Balkans, we have had a war in that region every 20 to 30 years since the end of the Byzantine Empire. So, I don't know how I was talking the other day, and I said, look, my grandmother lived through World War I, World War II. If she would be still alive, no, she also lived through the Balkan War Bosnian War, right? So that's the third one. So, I mean, just imagine experiencing 3 wars in your lifetime, or being in Afghanistan and being born in a conflict, and that's all you know. So, yeah, but again, going away from that, as you say, it is a stressful situation, but it does also make you more focused in a way on certain things. And every situation brings something good as well. So as I say, you meet new people in another part of the world that perhaps I wouldn't have met them if I stayed in Zagreb. So at the end, everything turns out for good.
Yes, and everything brings something valuable to your life, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing this. I know this is a bit of a personal topic to discuss, but I really do appreciate you opening up about it, especially in the light of recent events in Ukraine. But to continue with a bit of a lighter topic, what kind of repertoire are you most passionate about?
Wow, well, things have been changing. So going through that time of competitions where, I did what I had to do in terms of what were the set pieces or what was my free choice. And later on, my inclination to solo repertoire was more on I would say, Spanish South American flavor. I wasn't keen ever on a contemporary music too much. And then later on, the more things started developing in the realm of chamber music, and when we started thinking about projects and commissions and so on, again, we are going back to the richness of the folklore of different traditions. So some of the things that we've done, like for example, a Sephardic journey project based on the music from Sephardic Jews from Spain. And you realize there's a trove of music there that you can take and develop it into compositions for various group of various instruments. Before that, and Balkan project, music based on music from my country, which is very dear to me. So those were, let's say, two sources of inspiration to work with the composers and to ask them to create commissions, to create compositions. We commissioned them and to create compositions based on those, on that music. I think later on, I do like the idea. This is what I love about collaboration: is that you work with other people and they have the idea, and jointly you come to something that you like. That is even that you perhaps couldn't even envision by yourself in the first place. So collaborations are something that I really, really like. And I say that not only because of collaboration that I do with my wife, but also collaborations that we do with the composers when they are giving some ideas, so that we go back and forth in that creative process. So when you say, what I'm drawn to, I would say at this point now, we are waiting to do another project which is called River of Fire, based compositions based on Romani folklore.
Oh, okay.
What we call it, gypsy music. So you can just imagine what incredible music that is. But also, if you go a little bit into history and you think about where are the origins of those peoples, that starts from that they started in India, right? And then as a nomad spread around the world everywhere in the world. And then their music has evolved from India through Middle East, through the Balkans, through, reaching, Eastern Europe, klezmer and so on. And then realizing all the way to Brazil. So evolution of that music is fascinating. So that's sort of like the current inclination.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And as you mentioned, commissioning pieces, I feel this is actually a big responsibility that as classical guitarists we actually have to do that, because the classical guitar repertoire, in comparison to the repertoire of some other classical instruments, is just a bit smaller, and it's of great importance to work in this direction as well. And as you say, you can get such fascinating ideas collaborating directly with composers that are still alive, and you talk to, and you talked about your ideas, and just kind of also help them in a way and understanding the instrument a bit better, and then maybe they feel even more inclined to write for it in the future. So I think that's a really, really important thing to be doing.
It is important, but I wanna point out that one does not do that because of sense of importance of such a matter, but from sheer desire to contribute, or not to in one way to contribute, but also to feel, okay, what else is there that can come to life, right? And then you start investigating or looking for things, and you have desire for new things to be created, right? Now I have a question for you. When we compare our classical guitar repertoire to other instruments, to which instruments do you refer?
Well, mostly piano, I guess. But of course, yes, the piano as we know it today is also not such an old instrument. That's also true, maybe.
The reason why it came to my mind just to go a little bit on this topic is because, do we ever think about solo repertoire of tuba?
Yeah, that's completely true.
Right. So what we are talking about instruments which are piano, violin, cello.
Yeah.
In terms of who do we compare ourselves to? And we are comparing ourselves to, if we are talking about strings instruments of such a strong tradition, and that obviously as a part of not only solo but orchestral and chamber music have that tradition. That's such a tremendous tradition. And piano, simply in sort of technical ways, is a very complex technically instrument as an instrument itself, that allows such a tremendous complexity of playing from the part of performer, meaning melodic, harmonic, contrapuntal, and so on. Right? It's a fantastic instrument. So it sort of like it gives itself to so easily to write so many things. Right? So when you say our responsibility and so on, yes, maybe the biggest responsibility is to show to the composers how incredible, how guitarists can play on such a high level. And I say that also in a retrospect of having judged a GFA competition this past summer. Mm-hmm. And seeing semifinals and seeing at what level I was just so moved, and I don't want to say impressed. Yes, of course, I was impressed by the level of playing of the candidates in the competition, but I was so moved to see our instrument being played by so many people on such an incredibly high level, and to see some compositions that were composed. So it felt really good. So I think we are doing quite a bit of that already.
Yes, going in the right direction for sure. And I also feel that more and more composers are less afraid of the guitar than they maybe some were, because in their education they also don't really kind of get acquainted with the instrument enough a lot of the times. In the curriculums of the universities, they don't put emphasis on this. They mostly learn about orchestral conducting for the piano and all these more mainstream classical instruments, let's say. So I think this is also actually going in a right direction, and the composers are more and more inclined to actually write for classical guitar. But
I think because they also meet guitarists and they are more at ease in this collaborative sense, that there's a certain way you have to help composer. If the composer has never played guitar or doesn't have experience in writing for guitar, that's when the guitarist's responsibility is to be patient and collaborate. And there are competitions. There's one festival called Twisted Spruce here in the United States that they are doing exactly that, pairing composer and a young guitarist through a period of several weeks or months to work on a composition, right? And that's where you clearly see, if the composer is if the composer has had some experience with guitar or not. So there are certain technical idiosyncrasies about the instrument that it is definitely our place to work with the composer and to help find the best way for their idea to be translated easily onto guitar and playable.
Yeah, that's a really great idea, actually. I wish more also music universities had such programs where composers and instrumentalists would kind of directly collaborate already during their studies and then kind of feel inspired to continue with that after they finish.
I'm sure that's happening. As a matter of fact, one of my students here in Chicago at the Roosevelt University is collaborating with a composition student on opera. So there is one aria or one song that they are working and she's playing. But it's exactly that. So to me, it's a great pleasure to see that collaboration going. That's a part of learning process. That's tremendous. Yeah.
Great. So from your concert and CD programs, I see you are very passionate about Spanish music, ranging from Gaspar Sanz to Sor and Tárrega. There's quite a selection of easy to intermediate Spanish pieces you recorded for guitar by masters. So let's hear your performance of Lágrima by Francisco Tárrega. I came across your book on competitions many years ago, and since then I've reread it many times, usually in one go. I actually have it right here. I feel it's much more than a guideline for young musicians attempting competitions. The chapters I keep on coming back to are the ones on imagination, musicality, stage presence, as well as mental preparation. Could you maybe unpack a few of those for our listeners?
Sure, that's a very interesting topic. So we are starting with imagination, and I like always to give sort of like a reference to my students that we like watching movies that are made in a way that first you have a great story that turns into a movie script, and then the movie is made, and then the music is fitted to that movie to enhance the storytelling, to enhance our emotional, to stir our emotions, to make us even more, how do you say, sensitive or to the story itself. So oftentimes I tell to my students, what would happen if you wouldn't have that music in the movie? It would sort of feel dry. It wouldn't be the same. Not at all. But we, as a performers, let's say, we recreate the music that's written by somebody else. Let's say we create it, we bring it to life. So how do we use our imagination to help us? So this is where I talk about the movies, and I say, now we reverse the process. We have the music. What kind of story can you write and imagine that fits the music that you are playing? So in the instance of Tárrega and Lágrima, words itself, it lends itself easily to start off with, a teardrop and thinking about the sadness or event that you can think, and it starts, in major key, then it goes to minor key, then again a major key. So, there are these changes. So what kind of story that is personal to you that you can remember, or what is the story that you can even imagine and write a short story? So sometimes I even ask my students, write yourself a story about that piece or about that chapter, because that imagination that helps you through one of the other points that you mentioned before, that mental preparation and the stage presence. So creating that story, that imagination, that's one important part for yourself at home, because you create one world that is your own world that you can dwell into. That's that music. It's abstract, it's inside of you, it's your imagination, it's your spirit that creates something, right? Musicality, I tend to divide it into two major fields. One is sort of like academic, which implies everything we learn from the first time we have a music lessons. What are the notes, what are the intervals, the keys, harmonies, counterpoint, musical forms, dynamics. Then talking about technique of the instrument. So there's a lot to learn through your schooling, through your education. And I don't mean that the schooling has to be just in the institution of schooling. You learn from somebody, or you learn yourself by immersing yourself in studying that subject. So there's a lot to learn in music, in the academic aspect. But the other aspect is the musicality that comes from your inclination on being how does your being resonate with the sound, with the music, with how excited you become about a certain phrase, how far you can take it, how can you pair it with the imagination. That teardrop, was it the teardrop when you lost a toy, or when you lost a dear one, right? I mean, there's a different emotional content in that. So you want to enhance that emotional output to the maximum, because coming onto the stage, you become an opening, a vehicle for the audience to follow you through to that part that you have created, that music. That's what you are creating. So as an audience, you go to a movie theater and you see a movie and you see that, a music and so on the screen. You go to the concert, you see a person or people performing. People on the stage have to be in that moment in a different emotional state, from sadness to happiness to whatever in between, right? That is our, let's say, job and joy to do that, so that others can follow with you through that, right? So did I answer all of them? Oh, you said stage presence. Stage presence. Then that whole story sort of makes you feel, or you think, okay, so I am here to enjoy myself and to make people enjoy. how do I prepare myself? Another thing you were talking about, that mental preparation. You learn about yourself, what kind of person you are. Are you prone to be distracted? Are you prone to be nervous? How do you deal with it? What do you do with those things? So instead of paying attention to negative thoughts that I realized that were happening to me through that period when I was going to the competition. So I recognized it because it was lots of competitions happening, lots of rounds were happening close together. So that pressure was coming to me, right? Oh, tomorrow I have to play. And I'm playing right after Zoran, or, oh, Aniello is there, oh my God. They're great players, why do I have to know who's playing? I only have to know what I have to do. So I learned to sort of like channel my thoughts from absorbing unnecessary information and learning how my mind, in not only mine, but our mind, in moments of stress, makes us be more alert to the danger. And in our case, it's in a great extent, it's an imaginary danger of being on the stage and making a mistake. Oh, what if? Well, what if? Nobody dies if you make a mistake, right? So, but what if I don't make music? Then I didn't enjoy myself, and the people walk out of the hall and didn't enjoy themselves either. So, what is good? What is it I want to think in order to enjoy myself when I'm on the stage? I want to know my story. Where is that story? That imagination. I'm well prepared. I understand what is the piece about. Everything. I did lots of preparation at home. I can enjoy myself. That means that if I can do it this well here, alone by myself, I can do it in the stage. The only thing is I have to be aware that I'm on the stage. What kind of thoughts are going to start coming to me, and I'm going to divert my thinking to where I want to be. So it is a process, and that process and that mental preparation, and that's ongoing process that happens on the stage as well. But that's the process that is behind the stage. What is up front is you making audience feel like you are sincerely there to give them a present.
Yeah, and telling them a story through your music, of course. So maybe going back to music education, do you think that classical music education is going in the right direction? What do you think kind of taking a wholesome approach to teaching students mean to you? And what are actually the skills that differentiate a great teacher from just a great player?
Music education, what in one way worries me a lot, having been in this country for a while, is the cost of higher education here. And it's a big topic, politically speaking, here in this country as well, right? That's one thing that always is in the back of my mind. Other thing is, like, do we, in a higher education, do we have now too many people graduating, and not only in music, but in any other field, that do we prepare students for that particular, I don't want to say quote-unquote job, right? Or is it just over the years, perhaps my philosophy has shifted to say, okay, here I have these students, I'm going to teach them to the best of my ability to be a better guitarist, a better musician, to enjoy themselves, to understand the complexities of learning, one piece, preparing one exam, doing their recital, finishing their degree, to see that as a whole project, and the process of how do you engage with a complex discipline, and how do you break it apart, learn each segment, and how do you put it together. There's a certain similarity between that approach to this platform, that Guitar by Masters, right, where just with a single piece, you can pinpoint to one segment, and you say, how do I solve this little puzzle here? How do I, make that shift better? Why? What is it I have to pay attention in terms of, first of all, musical aspects, and how those musical aspects are going to dictate my thinking in a technical way, how to solve it, right? So that's the thing that maybe, and even more so now, over the years, I would say that my philosophy has shifted, that I look at each student, even if I have like an elective student who studies accounting and takes the guitar as an elective. The joy of that student that went from 0 to playing Lágrima over 2 years, that's an achievement. And when you see that student is coming back, because they are hungry for that. So it doesn't really matter to me whether I go from, hey, put your third finger on the second string on the third fret, and from the very beginnings to, let's unpack, I don't know, Sonata by Brouwer, right? There are challenges in every way. The point is that as an educator, you have one student, and your responsibility is to take that student from here when it came to you to here, to there, to there, to there. Up. Doesn't matter regardless of level of playing, right? And when you asked me something about great players versus great teachers, two don't go together necessarily, right?
Exactly.
But so I cannot name to you a great player that I think it's not a good teacher. Neither I would do it in an interview, obviously. But I will tell you a moment when I had a masterclass with David Russell in the Netherlands, in Den Haag. I think it was a Royal Winter Music. Didn't get past second page or something like that. Well, that was a moment to me when I saw a great player blowing my mind with being a great teacher. What kind of information he was unpacking in front of me, and how he was, opening that piece for me. So, those two things not necessarily go hand in hand, but you certainly also have lots of examples where you see that's the case, right? So, one way or another.
Yeah. For sure, yeah. And I really appreciate that your approach to teaching is very individualized. Like you said, you get a student who plays how he plays, and then your mission is to get him to a certain point, and however you're able to do that based on their skills, based on their motivation, you do it. And yeah, I think that's actually how great teachers teach, to just kind of recognize what someone has and what they still lack maybe, and how they can develop as effective as possible in a way.
And this is also very, well, I don't want to say unique in the sense of this is the only instance that it happens. I'm sure that there are in other fields as well, but it is not so common that we have a situation where you're teaching one-on-one. On an educational level, on a university level, that's highly inefficient for the institution, because teacher is with one student at a time rather than a class. But in a class, you are more lecturing rather than teaching, because teaching, or the word education, is the origins come from the word, I don't know what's the word, but I know the origin is like, to accompany somebody in the journey. And in order to accompany somebody in the journey, you have to learn about them. So there's a process when you, in the first few lessons, when you are learning about the student, how the student responds, what kind of things you can say to one student, what kind of things you can say to other. With somebody you can be a little bit more harsh and can motivate them. Somebody can be more sensitive and they can, give up. So there's a great deal of maybe even psychology involved in teaching.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so maybe let's talk a bit about chamber music. the Cavatina duo that consists of you and your wife, Eugenia Moliner, will soon be celebrating 30 years of your very active chamber music career. Congratulations. What are the invaluable skills we can all learn through chamber music?
Oh my God. So much. Well, first, rhythm. Okay, and going back to teaching and educating, I've seen one of the so often in teaching my students that, they learn we learn the right pitch, but don't place that pitch at the right time. And I came to call that also a wrong note, right? Because if you play the right pitch in the wrong time, that's a wrong note. That's not the right place to play that pitch. So that rhythm, that is what is so important for me, that I realized that in chamber music. What I realized, the role of the guitar as more of accompanying instrument, because of its harmonic characteristics versus a solo instrument like a flute. What else? Imagination, communication, collaboration, talking, and then the benefits of that. Like when you can talk the language of music, and when you can communicate in that language with other person, you're bypassing part of the mind that we usually use most of the time. This is very cognitive. This is how we understand each other. We both speak English. We're both talking about guitar. We understand what we are talking. But if we are going to play the music, and we are going to share those melodies, and we're going to dance with it and play and so on, I mean, those moments of sharing, of communicating with other human being through the abstract of music, that's a fascinating phenomenon. So that's for me the biggest benefit, besides all these little ones. Well, not little ones, important ones that I've mentioned before. But this is really a crown jewel.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I completely agree. Chamber music, everyone should play chamber music. I feel you're kind of missing out if you're only doing solo music as a classical guitarist, for sure. Okay, and the next question. In a world that is ever digitizing, online learning has slowly becoming a norm. What do you maybe like or dislike the most about online learning platforms?
Let's talk about few platforms. For example, one platform is this Guitar by Masters, right? The reason why I got so hooked on that platform is that it allows, in a sort of passive way, because it's not there's a certain interaction, but a limited interaction and I don't mean just this platform, in any, that you cannot get a real-time feedback from your teacher, right? So in that sense it's a passive, but it contains a knowledge that is presented in the best possible way given today's technology. Right? So before we had, stone tablets, then we had papyrus, then we had books, then we had, photos and so on. So improve our technology that allows us to transfer our knowledge onto that technology and pass it onto next generation. So this one I like very much because you can hear a person perform, you can hear a guitarist perform, you can follow the score. The teacher can pinpoint the certain things and explain exactly what is it you have to do. Then you have ability to practice with that. So in terms of digital content, I think that's probably the best we can have today. Who knows what we will have 30 years from now, right? Another thing, we are talking here on Skype. I teach a lot on Skype. It has its advantages that student can take a lesson from me, I can communicate with teacher. There's lots we can do. Yes, the best thing is in person. The best thing is when I can take your fingers and you can feel the touch. Maybe we eventually will have these suits that we can dress on and we can transfer the tactile sense as well. right? But it's amazing how far the technology has come and what it allows us to do, right? So it still does not replace the creator of the content or a teacher that is behind. It just, we are getting more and more tools at our disposal to convey our knowledge to the other side. So I am all for technology. I love it, but I'm also going back to education, and we are talking about imagination, we are talking about a stage presence and so on. In what we do in music or in art, humans are still irreplaceable. So great technology, fantastic tool, but let's get together in the festival and celebrate.
Yeah, let's have a
like that. Exactly.
Live concert.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Live concert and live masterclass and live gatherings and live experiences in teaching as well.
Yeah, and what you mentioned, of course, it's invaluable to have a one-on-one individual lesson in person with the teacher. But I feel that these digital platforms also have this advantage that you can learn from tens or hundreds of different really great teachers, which is amazing. You have this at your fingertips, basically, with really high-quality audio, with all the software that helps you. I mean, it's insane. Like things like this did not exist 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And again, what is going to be a few years from now? You sign up on the platform and then you say, how does this person teach? What is this person? And you can find what resonates with you from a different teacher. So for the user, for the consumer, that's a fantastic tool because it brings you access to so many different flavors before you can decide, oh, I like that one. Right? I like that teacher. I like that from this one. And you make your own cocktail.
Exactly, yeah. Another beautiful piece you recorded for Guitar by Masters is a traditional English folk song, Greensleeves. Let's have a listen. So to finish off, here is a few questions by the Guitar by Masters subscribers and followers. We always post a question box on our Instagram and Facebook stories a few days ahead of recording these podcasts. So stay tuned and your question just might get asked in our next episode. The first question is actually 3 questions. What do you listen to besides classical guitar? Do you listen to other genres? And how important is it to have a wide range of musical interests and experiences?
Very important, because there's so much great music besides classical, right? So I love grew up, with the music of the 80s, so very often I go back and listen to the best rock songs of the 80s. I love that. I love Queen. I mentioned before, I love Beatles. I like listening jazz a lot. I like listening flamenco a lot. My desire is that one day I would go to Spain and study flamenco. So, learning a different music. And for example, listening some of the Indian music. All these years that we spent in visiting in India, like 5-6 years, we were going very often there. And being exposed to their music live meant very different experience than listening Indian music, like ragas from before. Because the opening of their music is so long. But there's a cultural background to that. So just listening and on recording wasn't ever appealing. But when I went there and I went listening live, and understood what is it about, that preparation, just meditation, just getting into that, and it's a different pace of life. It's a very different context. So then I started liking that music as well. So yeah, whatever comes and crosses my, sometimes also with my son, he's a teenager, so he comes and says, what do you like this? And I listen something, I don't like, not my cup of tea. And he says, my God, your taste is so, one thing and you don't go out of your box. But I ask him sometimes to recommend some things just to see what else is out there. What was the other question?
Another actually interesting question that we got for you was, can you tell us a bit about your other interests besides music?
My other interests besides music? I like seeing beautiful things. I like paintings. I like philosophy. I like science. I like what science discovers. The other day I was watching this amazing human achievement of pointing all the telescopes from the Earth towards a very distant point in the universe and observing a black hole. How did a human come up with the idea of, well, first the premise was we need to make a telescope the size of the Earth in order to capture to detect a black hole. And somebody came up with the idea, instead of constructing such a telescope, you simply synchronize all the telescopes around the globe to look at the same direction. I mean, the feats of engineering and ingenuity of humankind is amazing. So that's another thing that interests me. We mentioned before technology. What is technology doing? And how that is going to impact our lives in so many ways. And as much as that is important and fascinating to me, the technology and achievements that we can do, also with genetic manipulation or enhancement of our bodies and so on. There's always one other element that I always go back to, and that is what I mentioned before, the communication between us as a human being, and the connections that we can create by jointly experiencing something. And that's what brings us so much more together. So that's maybe another area to me that is of interest, of connecting to on an instinctive levels as a human beings. I love doing things with my hand. I like doing things at home. I like doing constructions and things like that, building things. So there are some hobbies that I like that I do.
That's really great to hear. Thank you so much, Denis. I'm thrilled that you could join us today as our very first podcast guest. This was just such an insightful conversation, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Carmen, so much. And I'll be looking for other guests because I would like to hear other people and their experiences, and maybe some other time we can revisit some other topics. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. And now a huge thank you to you, our listeners. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you join me in the next one. You can find all the performance videos and interactive tutorials by Denis on guitarbymasters.com, as well as hundreds of other videos and tutorials that will help you bring your guitar playing to the next level. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast as well as our YouTube channel, and if you want even more exclusive content, please join our newsletter. I hope you have a lovely week and talk to you next time.